So it's really exciting to have these guys here. And unfortunately, like everything with COVID, we have always one or two casualties. I hope everybody is keeping your distance and your mask and everything is going well on that regard. So I want to thank George for kind of setting the table for this and for his continued friendship and commitment to changing the industry and accelerating transformation. It's really exciting to have him here. So
thank you.
Thank you for being here, George. I want to introduce you to Charlie Nobles from Ubiquia. He actually happens to be a Doug too. And in many ways, this is my own personal opinion. He wouldn't budge and corroborate nothing. But you may remember that Duke Energy bought a little company called Progress once. And it's because Progress was running a really efficient place and it had smart meters and it was kicking butt and taking names. And Charlie happened to be the guy that was, listening to management and he was getting it done, baby. So Charlie, thank you for being here and now being a Ubiquia. I'm curious what you're going to tell us about how you're going to change the world. I also want to say thank you to Sunil Cherian, who's the CEO of Spirae. It's one of those interesting words to learn to say, but now once you say it, it's hard to forget it. He's been doing, microgrid controllers and software and all kinds of cool things as an amazing EE. Living in Fort Collins, is a Colorado State grad. We're not going to hold that against him. But he lives in a beautiful city and everybody wants to go see him to go skiing every weekend. So, and then we have John Grotes from Enbala, who was recently acquired by Generac. And that's an interesting discussion just to kind of figure out, wow, if I was Enbala and I had 800,000 gensets installed in America and new customers, what would I do with that? That would be like an amazing playground. So we're going to hear a little bit about that. So I'm going to ask them to really introduce themselves real quick and maybe give you a little bit about their company. I think it's important that you all understand what they do in their companies. And they're really companies that are getting it done, right? And George is willing to go as far or deep or regress in time as he likes since he already had a keynote. So I'm going to start with Charlie because I think Charlie is one of my superheroes. He's never known about this, but I think he is.
Am I on here?
Yeah, bring it really to you closer and they'll figure it out.
Hello. Reminds me of I'm old enough to remember a band called Emerson, Lake and Palmer. If you don't remember them, it's okay, but you're dating yourself if you do. They have a song where the lyrics say, "Welcome back, my friends, to the show that never ends. So glad you could attend. Come inside, come inside." And sometimes that's the kind of song you need to sing to get people to come into an auditorium. Don't look at the rest of the lyrics for that song, though, because it's quite crazy. But the rest of the lyrics are disturbing. But those lyrics actually are appropriate for this audience, okay? Now I know I've put something in your head like a worm in your head, and then now you'll go back and you'll look at the lyrics to that song, but do it later.
The other thing, to interrupt you for a moment, I want to make sure they get right? They know about the EEs being the smartest guys in the room, but this gentleman is not a Yankee, so pay attention to the way he speaks.
Right. I have a speech impediment. It's called Being from the South, which reminds me of another song, but I'll let that go. So at Ubiquia, that's how you pronounce it. It comes from the word ubiquitous, which means everywhere. We make products that both help build networks, broadband networks, and also devices that hang off of networks, narrowband and broadband networks. Typically carrier LTE-based networks, public or private. Some of the utilities are building their own private networks, private LTE-based networks. I'm a utility. You mentioned Doug. For those of you that don't know what that means, dumb old utility guy. So I'm a Doug. That's why he was calling me, and you guys didn't pick up on that. I did. We'll talk later.
I'm a Doug.
There you go. I love being a Doug. So my background is utilities. I head up our utility segment. So Ubiquia is a company, I could say we're FUBU, for us, by us. If you look at our investment is from the utilities to build products for the utilities. It's self-serving, and that's exactly what the kind of money you want. That's called smart money. So we serve the utilities, public power, municipal, like San Marcos here in town, which is a municipal utility, cooperatives, IOUs, all the above. And products that range from 5G small cell devices. You'll see an announcement we made with Ericsson, did a press release this week. Their 5G street radio is actually our product with their logo on the side. They announced that this week. And on one end, the other end is a utility grid monitoring grid assets that have never been monitored before. The grid's not so smart in many ways. There's literally millions of devices, poles, structures, transformers out there that are not monitored. So the utility has no view as to the current condition of the patient. So the full range from that. And then in the middle is this area of smart cities. George did a great job talking about the kinds of things you want to do in a city. About 2 years ago, we acquired the assets of City IQ from GE Current, which had camera sensors, and they were doing edge intelligence. And we wrapped that into a new hardware platform. And so we are developing and selling devices that provide municipal Wi-Fi downtown for helping bridge the digital divide, but also camera sensors for helping resolve everything from evidence management. You mentioned they can't hire more policemen. So what do you do? To traffic optimization, all of the above. And now I'm trying to repurpose those products into the substation to provide some idea of substation security. If you can detect a homeless person on the street, can you detect a raccoon in a substation, which is actually not a good day for someone?
Right.
Or an arc flash from switchgear, or people in the sub that shouldn't be in a sub, and then flag that and have video capture of it. So it's a repurposing utility use case for really a smart city play. So that's kind of the range of what we provide.
Brilliant, brilliant. Sunil, you want to give us your spread of products and what's going on with the microgrid world?
Sure. First of all, thanks for pronouncing Spirae the right way. I'm Sunil Cherian, and I founded the company, over 15 years ago. And when I was figuring out a name, Spirae came from inspiration. This was the middle of inspiration, so that's kind of what I thought. A few years later, I'm pretty convinced that it's actually the middle of perspiration. So the two seem to go hand in hand, but so at least you know how to pronounce it, right? What we do over the years has really been focused on figuring out the technologies needed to bring distributed energy resources into play at scale. While we hear about DERs and DERMS and ADMS and all that all day long, when you ask yourself, what are these DERs for? At the end of the day, it only makes sense if it actually empowers or really adds value to the energy consumer, right? Whether it's a residential, commercial, industrial, wherever you are, it has to add value there. Now, if you think about the problem of actually taking solar inverters and load control and electric vehicles and from any make, manufacturer, model, vintage, and gluing it together to achieve one or two specific things, you can just see the exponential complexity of this problem. And since we are on an industrial controls panel, if you look at how things were done in the past, it was really, you have PLC systems, DCS, SCADA, whatever, smart engineers or, programmers going in and programming those systems, once, and you walk away. Like the building management system in this hotel. You program it once when it's commissioned and you walk away and you're done, right? What DERs do is that you change that completely and turn it upside down. And you're really in a situation where you have to mix and match on demand and deliver that. And I think that's what Spirae does, and I think that's what the industry needs to do at scale to succeed in this.
Excellent, excellent. And John, in a similar way, maybe help them understand a little bit sort of the nuances between where Spirae plays and where you guys play and kind of the value prop there.
Sure. And I also have to say thanks for pronouncing Enbala correctly, because that's often, and everybody says Enbala, and I even sometimes get in that, but you have to think about it. The name Enbala comes from energy balance. So, and like Andres said, we were acquired by Generac last year, October of last year. And something I did find out is Generac comes from Generate AC. They are the home standby generator company, so that was something I learned. So if nothing else, they purchased us because we were also a combination of two names. But so what Enbala does, a lot of similarities to Spirae. There's a lot of us kind of in that space because it's growing, and there's, like Sunil said, a tremendous demand. So when we say energy balance, traditionally in the power system, as you probably all well know, as loads change, as frequency changes, you have to continuously adjust to that. Well, traditionally that's always been done at the bulk system, the large scale generation level. Well, there is a tremendous amount of untapped capability at the grid edge now. So while one thermostat or one generator or one battery storage, they can't do much. You aggregate them together and you do have, that is the impetus of the name, virtual power plant. You truly have a power plant with all this capability that if it orchestrated in a large fashion, you have a tremendous amount of capability. So that's really what we are designed to do. And then the reason for the Generac for them to acquire us was, as Andres said, actually you said, I think 800,000, it's more like 2.4 million.
I know I was short. It's a huge playground.
They have about 2.4.
I would be salivating.
They have about 2.4 million home standby generators. Now, certainly it doesn't mean that we can just immediately connect to all of them and do anything with it, but in certain locations and in certain, especially some of the newer units are already coming out pre-connected, so that if the customer or that local utility, if they want to aggregate together for certain grid services, we're well positioned to provide that to them, as well as battery storage and other demand side resources.
Absolutely. So you can see that where these guys are kind of bordering each other, right? And then Honeywell, I would argue, and maybe George can correct me if I'm wrong, but they have a gazillion products as one of the most preeminent, global industrial conglomerates in the world. And, I have Honeywell thermostats and Honeywell, I don't know how many things in my house and my business. But Honeywell also serves another role which is really interesting. All the big boys do, the Siemens, the GEs, which is this notion of system integration, putting these things together, making them work, right? And this is, in a great sense, what the system, with the Smart City division is focused on enabling, right? Maybe all Honeywell things, maybe not. They build a Keiretsu. So tell us a little bit about that.
Well, so cities are systems of systems, right? And so smart city, deeply integrated smart city solutions are integrated systems of systems. And so to achieve the value possible from integrating these systems, that hard work must be done, right? We're making progress, and as Andre said, we are a master systems integrator. We come from the OT world, right? And when you think about cybersecurity threats, those embedded systems are the greater threat, right? The IT assets have been hardened for a while, for the most part. And so our role is to really serve as that master systems integrator and integrate parking and street lighting with traffic and water, wastewater, meters, electric, water, gas meters. These are not just different systems, these are different organizations, right? I've done some wonderful things in my career, and the hardest by far the hardest thing I've ever done is bring the city, the utility, and a real estate developer together to create transformational change, right? It has nothing to do with technology. It has everything to do with stakeholder alignment, right? That is what is really required to realize the potential of this smart city. It's not about technology. It's absolutely not.
Right. So in that sense, let me go around and start with Charlie again. So give us a sense of, clearly, we're here in Digital 360. We get it. We are early adopters. We are, connected at the IV of transformation, digital transformation. We love this stuff. What's getting in the way of the acceleration, Charlie, for you? When you're having these meetings, when you're having these conversations, other than capital and cash for the order that is not ready right now, what's really getting in the way? What are the challenges?
Well, I think George made a great point, and we actually talked about it. We don't wing this. We actually talked before this panel. We chewed on some things, and one of the utility types is a municipal utility. In theory, goal alignment is possible because the city owns the utility. The utility manages the assets for the city. And I made this comment that, in a perfect world, they have stakeholder alignment. And I have a set of twins. They're grown now, so I understand this very well. They're siblings. And George said, but they're not twins, they're siblings. Siblings that don't always get along. So if they were twins, identical twins, they would be perfectly aligned, but they're not. Even in those cases, it's difficult to get alignment between what the utility wants and the city that owns the utility. So I think, obviously, one thing will always be the case is stakeholder alignment.
Right.
Because that actually uncovers and allows the capital to often flow.
Right.
The second thing I'll say is, let's take the broader IOUs. I've been on panels the last few years, and I've made the statement, and there's occasionally been an investor or utility person in the room, and I apologize ahead of time. I'm getting ready to throw shade on you. So cover yourself. I am one of those IOU guys. I'm a Doug. I've heard cities say, oh, we're going to do this and this and this and this. And I knew in my heart of hearts they had no way of making it happen. The owner of all of the assets they needed to sit on top of, plug into, leverage, was the utility, who was not aligned with that city's goal. The city is the single biggest customers that they serve. They send a check, they hand carry the invoice for the monthly consumption for the city of whatever to them. They don't just send it to them in the mail, yet they're not aligned at all. I once put together a panel with Duke Energy in Charlotte, and I asked Charlotte, what do you want? And they mentioned all these things, smart this, smart that, smart lighting. I knew they didn't own any of the street lights. And I had Duke, I said, okay, what do you want? And he mentioned things that the Charlotte guy didn't say. And I said, so you see there's a gap. Actually, I set this up. I've never been asked to chair that panel again. I created an argument because I pointed out what we all knew, and that was they are not aligned. It's not about technology, it's about alignment. Now, the good news, because I am actually a naive/optimistic person, is that I think alignment is happening. Mm-hmm. I'm so excited because I see utilities who, because of their eroding load, they have to have revenue streams. Mm-hmm. They're realizing the value of these assets. There was a time in California they were trying to shed streetlights. And now they're thinking, wait just a minute, maybe that's not a good move. Maybe I don't want to shed the street lights. Maybe I want to leverage that vertical real estate for something. And so I think they're getting in line with if I make the city smart that I serve, then I can actually make some revenue, not just goodwill. So I think alignment is critical. Again, we represent all types of great technology, but the technology's got to be pieced together to create value. It sounds so trite to say, but to create real value for all the players. And the utilities have a play. They're getting off the sideline. They're getting into the game. Yeah. So I think that's exciting.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely right on the money. So Sunil, from your point of view, again, what are some of the roadblocks that are preventing us from having panacea, but,
Pandora,
happen?
is that what you want?
Yeah.
I think we already have that.
Yeah.
Well, I'll build on what was just said, but from a different perspective. I think one of the biggest choke points or limiting factors in scaling all of this is, I'd say, simplicity. Simplicity from the perspective of the party that has to write a check for something, right? Right now, what's happening is that if you just look at this DER and intelligent control space, we already heard today about AI, ML, DL. You talk in the DER space, there's DERs, there's DERMs, there's ADMS, and it goes on, right? You have VPPs, you have nanogrids, you have microgrids, you have smart grids. What the heck is this, right? That is one of the problem. And when you actually talk to the buyer, they are thoroughly confused. I mean, they may be well-meaning, they may even want to be early adopters, but we don't give them a chance, right? So I think a big part of the problem is falls on, I think, technology companies and systems integrators, parties that are assembling these solutions for end customers. Somehow, simplification has to occur over things that are disparate, right? So, Generac has, power gen units, but that doesn't work by itself, right? You need, there's an ATS, there's a switchgear, there are meters, there are breakers, all of which comes from different parties. Now, who is responsible for integrating all of that? At that point, are you buying an integrated power plant? Are you buying energy as a service? Or are you buying something else, some sort of performance contracting or benefit sharing product? Or is it all SaaS somehow, magically, you just ignore the hardware? That's the kind of problem where I think we are facing a lot of challenges and opportunities. By now, I think there is a good recognition that this issue is pretty significant, and whoever cracks that nut, I think really will open up the markets in a big way.
Right. John, your thoughts on this and what's keeping you from running faster?
Yeah, so I think two key themes that I think everybody up here would probably agree with is regulatory just hasn't quite kept up. I mean, it's still a barrier. And just kind of at a higher level, just the utility industry, and I think, Andres, you had your joke a couple days ago about how quickly the utility industry moves, and if you want to put a couple executives in front of a glacier, I forget how that went.
Yeah, how do you kill an executive, a utility executive, like make them commit suicide? So you put him in front of a glacier.
So, I mean, there is just some truth to that. It's a slow-moving industry, but it's been a very conservative industry for a long time. So to fundamentally change, almost change everything overnight is just, it's tough. Yeah. I think everybody up here, certainly Sunil and others would agree that, technology is there to do a lot more. Now, it doesn't mean that it's totally mature and there's not room to continue to, improve on that, but there's just so many things that technology has opened the door, but again, kind of a lot of the regulatory framework, how the utilities can rate base, how they can, capitalize certain investments is a bit of a barrier. Now, glass half full, I do think a lot of that's changing, and I think a big wave that's going to change a lot of this, at least on like the DER side, is FERC 2222. For those of you, if you're not familiar, that is the ruling that came out last year that now is telling all the ISOs and regional transmission operators, you now have to remove all barriers to allow DERs to participate in the wholesale marketplace. So it wasn't to say that DERs didn't participate before, but now every single ISO and RTO has to come up with a plan of how they are going to allow these DERs and multi-asset DERs to be able to participate. And I do see that being a very large change coming. In fact, I was talking to an IOU in the Midwest just this morning, and they centered the whole topic around FERC 2222 because they said, we see this, it is a threat to some of the utilities because, aggregators can come in then and start to really own that customer relationship. But this particular utility said, we want to get out in front of this. How can we be that additional, channel to the customer, and we can be that aggregator, and not only can we help the bulk level or the wholesale power, but we can open up new markets even within the distribution grid. So it is starting to change a lot of the thought process as some of this moves forward.
Absolutely, and I have to tell you that Order 2222, which is all about the aggregators being allowed to play, and you can imagine who could be an aggregator of assets on the customer side of the meter, maybe somebody who has a relationship with meters or manages the thermostat, or so this is why, if you keep connecting the dots where this is heading, right? But Order 841 before that is really the one that really establishes the notion of DER being recognized as a valid asset that needs to be dealt with at the bulk level, right? Even though it's happening behind the meter at any level, industrial, commercial, and residential. Now, clearly, guys, there are some challenges in, again, being an optimistic, the ultimate optimist perhaps, in my household at least, that, these are opportunities. And so, there is a lot of pioneers out there. You have customers, you're making payroll, you're paying salaries. So can we share where this is happening? Can you give me a couple of shining bright stars so I can get juiced up and go look it up? Where is this happening? George, where is this happening?
So clearly this is happening at scale outside of North America. And where we are starting to see real traction inside North America is, I'll put it this way. Everybody wants to go to San Marcos, but they don't quite know how to get here, I guess is, ignore Google Maps for a moment, right? So they all have a vision, but they don't know how to operationalize that vision. And so we are working with cities to really, for those that do not have a smart city strategic plan, it is really the framework that guides their supplementary or the rest of their planning effort and their investment effort. And this is really important now because, as I said earlier, we are sitting in front of this enormous wave of federal infrastructure investment, right? And so what has held back smart city deployments at scale has been financing, right? But really what holds it back is leadership. If you've got strong leadership, clear vision that is broadly supported, that provides the stakeholder alignment because we have things called election cycles. And if that vision isn't broadly supported, it ebbs and flows with election cycles. And that you can't make long-term progress. And the other thing that is really critical is really understanding the business model. If you can identify a sustainable business model, all of this will scale. And until you do, it just stays small point products, small point projects, right? It's not going to scale. And so we're helping cities create that master plan and get it in front of this infrastructure investment and then develop those sustainable business models so that any of these projects can scale.
Yeah. Charlie? Successes.
Okay. In fact, that's why I read the sports section first. You see who wins.
That's right.
The front page is who loses, right? The sports section is who wins. File that away. Or ESPN. So from here, radially, the closest I would say would be just down the road, CPS Energy, San Antonio. This is a large municipal utility in which the utility and the city are partnering to create these zones and try different technologies. And I don't mean one or two or three that have no critical mass, but try them in enough critical mass to really have good measurements to be able to extrapolate the value. And they're going to spend some real money in doing so. And then they're going to grow from these zones out so that at least they've identified areas, outcomes they want to see, and then some technology providers have suggested some of these outcomes and that they've funded deployment of them, and this is ongoing. So that's one. So let's move a little further out. Let's talk about Vegas. Vegas has a very different approach. They grabbed some CBRS spectrum, another enabling piece of the puzzle where the DOD had to give up some spectrum they were sitting on. The FCC auctioned it in a way that was democratic, that allowed even small cities and even cooperatives to acquire a piece of 3.5 gig spectrum, repurpose it for broadband or any other use, create their own private network based on it. Vegas is using CBRS and can use that to connect fairly broadband devices, cameras and sensors, which are now very disparate, into one network. That they could all ride on in this area. And it's everything from air quality sensing at the bus stops, because we realize that people that use public transportation unfortunately have to sit there at bus stops and just smell the fumes. And it's actually it's like a progressive tax. It hits the poor harder. A little further out, let's go up to the northeast a bit. Let's talk about Schenectady, New York, with National Grid. Another case where a large IOU is partnering with a city, a mid-sized city, to create smart city applications at scale. I know that they're putting in thousands of lighting control nodes. They're putting in almost 500 devices on intersections where you have cameras, sensors, edge intelligence at every intersection in Schenectady. So these are scaled deployments, not just pilots that will have measurable outcomes.
Mm-hmm.
And other cities are just watching them to see what happens and just trying to figure out, what did you learn? How did it affect your business case? Can I get a copy of your business case? I'm trying to pull the ends of the rope together, make a knot.
Mm-hmm. Excellent, excellent. Sunil, a few successes perhaps?
Sure. Let me start by just explaining our model so you can actually understand the context of a couple of those successes. Our model really is to empower energy services companies or project developers to deliver integrated energy or hybrid energy solutions to their customers. So that's our model. So the intermediate party is the party that benefits. So it's not just about a piece of control software to run a microgrid, which is kind of the core or the secret sauce from Spirae's point of view, that's the technology. But it's how you actually empower this intermediate party to deliver that to their customers. That's a real challenge. So what that means is that if Spirae is involved in, as we were in the past, in actually helping do the integration, doing the configuration, doing the integration, helping with the commissioning, then scaling this is incredibly difficult. You really don't have the resources, or customers cannot even afford the cost of actually doing that because you have to bring too much expertise to the table. So what our customers are interested in doing is using their technical staff or their dealer networks. Somebody with the technical skills, if you're a solar installer and you have the technical capabilities to commission a rooftop PV system, how can you train them to configure, test, and deploy much more sophisticated hybrid energy systems? That's a fundamental problem. So we have developed all of the tool sets to actually do that, and it's actually available on the cloud. So it's a cloud platform that allows you to manage everything from configuring the systems, testing it in simulation, deploying that software, and running it in the field. You can put it on a controller, and it operates from there. So that's the model. So some of our big recent wins have been companies that have that type of capability. One of them is a very large, multinational power gen company. They're bringing in solar storage, adding that to their power gen fleet, and they want to get their dealer networks to deploy this around the world. They have dealer networks in 180 plus countries, and how do you get them to actually roll this out? So our platform is the means that they use to actually train that staff to actually be able to do that. And you are not programming anything. You're literally think of configuring these systems as selecting stuff from a drop-down list, and you can test it against simulation and actually deploy that. So that's been a huge win for us. But the sales process is really not about the controls, which is sort of taken for granted. There are different ways to actually do that. But the mechanisms to deploy this at scale really is very nascent. So that's a very good example of how we are scaling up, and some big wins. Another example is actually even more recent. It's an oil and gas company. Similar situation. They're looking at their upstream, downstream, or midstream, downstream models, and saying, if everybody's going to go electric, how do you monetize these assets from the distribution and onwards? And then exactly the same problem. Huge staff and capabilities to do all kinds of things globally, but when it comes to these new technologies, cross-training them and actually delivering them efficiently and lining up the business models are actually not straightforward at all. So they're using our platform to do exactly the same thing. You can construct the types of offers that they want to take to their target customer segments and almost activate them on a cookie-cutter basis. Think of it as how our favorite cable companies activate a service in your home. There's a box that shows up. They remotely activate it, and they start charging a monthly fee or something to actually, for internet, for cable, for security, whatever it is that they're offering over that network. Exactly the same way you're using microgrids as the model with a controller on premises to activate services anywhere. So that's the model that's scaling for us.
I love it. This is like watching YouTube to do your own microgrid, buy the pieces at Home Depot, do it yourself kind of thing.
That's it.
That's what Spirae has built. Unbelievable. John, you have a couple of successes, and
Sure.
Go ahead and embellish.
Okay. So we talked about barriers before, but the good news is there is some successful demonstrations that a lot of this technology does work. One is up in the Northeast in Portland General Electric. They're really kind of taking demand response and taking it to the next level, whether you call it demand response 2.0, advanced demand response. But what they're really trying to do is they're taking thousands and thousands of thermostats, and instead of just doing like an all system, all wide, to bring down that peak load, they're being much more precise. If it's a certain part of the system, or if it's a certain, they only need X amount of megawatts, then they want to target and orchestrate it such that they're just getting exactly what they need, which therefore then, it reduces, customer fatigue. As all of us, if we participate in a smart thermostat program, you see it come in, you may or may not get fatigued after a while saying, okay, I'm done with these events. So that by doing this, and they can target different people at different times, they can really, work on that. And then to George's point, a lot of the really scaled up demonstrations of this are internationally, just because they have more of a need right now, and they've got more of a structured framework to allow it. We work with one of the largest energy trading companies in Germany, RWE, and our system is integrated directly into their trading desk, and they are trading traditional generation dispatch. But at the same point, at any point when it's more desirable for them to call on, the demand side managed resources, they will call on that right in line with their traditional trading platform. And then the final one is another international utility. I'm not allowed to disclose the name. Some of them like to just kind of, keep their anonymity. So. But what we've done with them is we've actually pulled in over 1,000 residential battery storage units, and we are actually bidding into the secondary frequency market. So what that means is we're taking a signal from the AGC every 2 to 4 seconds, and we're actually sending new commands to that whole fleet of battery storage systems and be able to adjust it to that signal that's coming in. So it's a lot more advanced than anything we're doing, here in North America yet, but at least it gives us, the basis that, this technology can be used in these manners.
Yeah. Let me share a little bit about some of the things that Texas State is thinking about doing and help out, right? I mean, unfortunately, Dr. Amari had a last minute challenge and he couldn't make it for us. So I'm going to take a couple seconds to remind you all of CEDAR, right? And I think of the 4 of you here, I believe that Charlie's organization is thinking about joining. So I'm glad to hear that. The others, it should be start thinking about it. We have 12 members now. All the cities and utilities in the corridor are going to be members. And you saw all the new companies that are moving offices here, including FedEx and some other interesting logos. And so we are, at Texas State building this world-class, Disney World style playground for, boys with toys to try things out at scale like never before. And I go back to why we're doing that is because we have been talking to enterprises since 2019, and the overwhelming feedback is that everybody needs a significant playground to try things out other than a 20 by 40 or a 60 by 80 little warehouse lab, because the reality is just totally different. And so we're very excited about building 9 living labs in 700 acres, from a solar farm and a test track for vehicles and drone tracks and all kinds of things that we're building on smart networks and sensors and software. And the software lab is going to be truly off the charts with all the things that we're going to try, from what Dr. Song shared earlier about. Can you imagine if we actually got serious about writing better code so that the code generated less of a carbon footprint by consuming less energy. And what does that mean times all the servers in the world, kind of thing. And just by doing that, we already saved the planet, I'm sure. I mean, just the amount of inefficiency that we tend to enable and create by throwing more bodies and more routers or more things at anything, which is the classical thing of my brethren engineers, they want to build before they plan. It's just fascinating, you know. And so at some point in the journey of 10 billion to 300 billion, we are building our own problems by not doing them right. So I think that creates some interesting opportunities. So I was going to ask this guy some key scenarios and get some responses. If anybody wants to ask some questions, now is the time to approach the microphone, and we would be happy to engage with you, make it a little more interactive. So anybody has any scratching itch about anything that we can answer for. But respond to the following things, guys. So I have a few, okay? We're going to do them quickly. So respond to the following thing. You know, I thought CMG was doing a phenomenal job by spending the last 4 years helping GM get into the EV market. And then, you know, in all honestly, I'm a Ford company lover. I got a bunch of Ford cars in my house, and I own some stocks from them. But we all got blindsided. They announced the F-150 Lightning, and I had to go and put a down payment because I could run my house from the truck for 4 days. I mean, so George, and what do you think? What does that do to the business? And if a customer has 1,000 trucks in their parking lot, could they run their building? Well, what is Honeywell going to do about this?
So what my team is going to be focused on is helping cities understand the impact of fleet electrification. We believe that cities are grossly underprepared for the relatively rapid transition to electric fleets. And how will not only their fleets electrify, but what does that mean, to your point, Andres, for those batteries on wheels as building resources, as grid resources? What is the role of the city and the city utility or the investor-owned utility serving that city? Right now, these are all disconnected approaches, and for the most part, third parties are capturing the bulk of that value, right? The charging infrastructure service providers. And I see a near future where, let's just say, disintermediation is inevitable, right? So we're going to help cities and their serving utilities thoughtfully integrate and prepare for the electrification of their fleets.
Charlie, I see your wheels are turning. Smoke is coming out of your ears.
You don't know what I'm thinking. You don't want to know. To be honest, I'll tell you what I was thinking. I was imagining a world where houses are on wheels. They're called mobile homes. And then in the utility business, every utility has a flatbed that has a substation on a flatbed for restoration. They pull it in, they wire it up, and now they've got a mobile substation. And then you mentioned this battery storage on wheels, this Ford F-150, and those three things were linked together in my crazy head, just like that. I don't know what that tells you about me, but it's probably not good. So there are so many opportunities created by sometimes what is destabilizing situations like the Ford F-150. Now, if you could put a Jeep Wrangler in that situation, I'm all in. Okay, I'm a Jeep
It's
guy.
coming. It's coming.
Give me an electric Jeep Wrangler that still sounds like the Jeep I have, because you got to have this little sound machine working, then I'm all in. Okay. And again, everything I talk about or think about typically is utility-centric. But you're talking about combining mobilization with what's typically considered a fixed asset. You know, we like to build these central power plants and then radiate power out from that. Now we have distributed energy. Now, and the grid was never intended, by the way, for two-way traffic. It has choke points upstream. It's not intended. You put power on the grid, it's really not going very far. It's going up to the next distribution transformer, and it's kind of stopping, right? But then we have net metering. And so the grid will have to change into more of kind of a fiber link. Or what in terms of utility, it forces a different view of sectionalization. In the past, sectionalization of the grid, this has probably been in your book out here. So this is a quick little press to flesh for your book. Get this book out there, The Advanced Smart Grid, right?
Yep.
Did I say it right?
Yep.
Just like you paid me, told me. Imagine the grid used to be very uniform, radiate out, and then utilities sectionalized it only for the purposes of faster restoration.
That's right.
It still was one-way flow. It just, we're going to cut it in pieces so we could isolate the fault. Now what's happening is they're having to sectionalize to provide some means of two-way flow. That's a whole different engineering model, a business model. It's going to require different types of gear. Imagine transformers. Imagine solid-state distribution transformers.
You need protection gear.
Yeah, so this is actually scaring utilities to death, but it also creates a wonderful set of opportunities.
Yeah.
And I think this idea of being able to push data from any point into the grid and then disseminate it out with two-way flow is well, I don't know if I'll see it in my lifetime, but eventually that's where we're going.
Yeah. Sunil, what do you think? What do you do with this F-150 scenarios?
Let me, at the risk of throwing a wet blanket on your F-150, I'll blow dry it after that.
Please. I'm already buying one.
So you have it. It's in your garage. Power goes out. What do you do?
I have it.
Go get in the truck.
Get in the truck and go somewhere else.
If it's charged and I have set up and I land it from the grid, I turn it on and power my house.
Well, you won't. Unless you do a lot of extra engineering in your garage.
I know. I
okay.
just told you I'm going to island myself from the grid, and then I'm going to power my house.
Transfer switch. It's just in your garage. He's probably got a big transfer switch automated that allows two-way flow. Disconnects from the grid, brings in the Ford truck. He's good to go.
Exactly.
One double E taking me down, and double E helping me. We are the smartest people in the world.
Got your back.
Well, the point. Agreed. So you can absolutely do it. But that's the balance of plant problem that's actually out there, right? So if you use that ATS, you're no longer pushing power the other way, right? You're just using it for yourself.
True.
So the balance of a plant problem and who does that is really a big issue, right?
Oh, yeah.
When Tesla is rolling out their infrastructure, they're saying, here is your charger with it. And so they're creating their own networks to sort of privately solve some of those similar issues.
Yeah.
So if Ford is now getting into the business of saying, well, I will also supply the ATS with this, and by the way, you'll have a local contractor come and install it for you. That's really the problem. And I think hopefully the technical solutions are there, getting them deployed in a seamless way, depending on wherever you are. If it's a Bronco versus the Ford. The plugging it in and making that work, that connection point is the challenge. And I think it's true for any type of DER. For us, one of the problems we are facing right now, or I should say the problems we're solving for our customer right now, they're dealing with rental fleets, right? Similar situation. It's larger than an F-150, but it's a battery on wheels. You have gens on wheels. You have transformers on wheels. And their problem is essentially, how do I mix and match for a customer? So it only shows up when either there's an emergency or it's a construction situation or something like that. But the vehicle that shows up will be different every time. So this gen shows up and that battery on a trailer shows up. How do I connect it together to get an operational system? Similar problem.
Yeah.
And the amazing thing is you have the electrical problem, you have the sort of the administrative problem of actually saying it's this particular trailer and that genset and this is the combination. Who does that? How do you bill for this thing? How do you guarantee that the system will actually perform the same way no matter what mix and match game you play? Those are the types of challenges that have to be solved. But it's happening right now, and I think those are the technologies that will get applied.
You're making great points. You're making great points. John, are you going to tell me that you also think it's going to be harder, or are you you're going to tell me that you're going to manage those 800,000 F-150s day one, no problem.
Day one, no problem, okay. So a couple things. I also have a $100 reservation on one, so we'll see when my name comes up. But,
Excellent.
Not to throw more wet blanket, but if you want that thing to last 4 days, you better not turn on your AC or run your oven or anything else. It might be able to keep some lights on for you, but I'm not sure it has that capacity.
Yeah.
But I mean, going back to just the overall question, just managed EV charging is obviously something that's going to really pick up a lot of steam because, you know, I think 5 years ago, people started to see, okay, adoption is going to start to take off, especially when some pretty well-known models are going all EV. So I think utility executives first started salivating because they said, oh, we've had a drop in demand over the years. Here's, you know, electrified transportation. We're going to be able to get a whole lot coming. But now they're kind of also going, oh, but if we don't get in front of this, it could also be a huge challenge for us. So before we talk about vehicle to grid, just basic managed EV charging is going to be the first step. So that just means charge them in a time that is most beneficial to the grid. I heard a new statement from somebody out in California a few months back that, as most people are aware, California's, you know, their demand curves now look like a duck, and they call it a duck curve, where during the middle of the day, especially during a lightly loaded event, the belly of the duck, you know, that demand goes down so much because of the amount of PV generation on the system that they're getting negative pricing. So they want to incentivize load as much as they can during those times, and one way to do it is to really incentivize EV charging, and what they're starting to call it now, the term out there is EV happy hour. So they're trying to incentivize load. So before we talk about vehicle to grid or vehicle to house, you know, just being able to manage when that EV infrastructure, when those vehicles are charging is going to be the first step.
Yeah.
And then obviously then, you know, down the road, you know, the rest of that's going to be there. But just managing when they're charging is going to be that first block.
Right. Anybody has a burning question? Anybody? Llewellyn is getting up. He has a question? No, he has a call. Oh, Elena has a question. Excellent.
Hurry.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, I just shouldn't have told you that. I was just joking.
The mic is not working on the questions.
Hello.
Oh, there you go.
Hello. George, to your point, system of systems, right? A lot of challenge with EV infrastructure is that at the moment, if you allow the two-way flow, you actually lose warranty, right? So for a lot of vehicles. So what is your experience with both the cities to allow this peer-to-peer trading, right? But also with the vehicle manufacturers, with the hardware manufacturers to actually allow for the kind of use that you're describing. Is that a bottleneck in your experience, or do you see that getting easier?
So while they're thinking about that, and somebody's going to jump in and answer it, here's the dream that I have. And I'm saying this because HEB is in the house. Tesla sells cars. But if I'm a Tesla network member, I can charge for my car for free. You know, maybe the new guys have to pay a little. But I think it's, for the most part, free. Now, what if HEB decided not to sell electricity, but self-generate electricity for them, and then the extra capacity, they sell it for free because I'm an HEB Plus member, so I charge a HEB for free. Nothing to prevent HEB from doing that. It's not illegal to give energy for free. So anyway, anybody want to answer the question?
If I understood your question correctly, we've been talking about distributed energy resources. We've also been talking about demand response.
Oh, yeah.
Where we're trying to reduce load. And we have both happening simultaneously. Look at the house again. Okay, we know that people come home at 6 p.m., they plug in the electric vehicle, the load curve spikes. But PV, the load curve drops. It creates odd voltages and currents backfeeding into the transformer. If you can monitor the transformer, guess what? You can actually pick out, oh, the PV just kicked in, oh, the EV just got plugged in. What the heck is a load curve anymore? You know, load curves to the utilities are somewhat like actuary tables to the life insurance companies. They
That's
look
right.
ahead, 5 years from now, this is the load curve, we'll place a substation here, generation here. It's very predictable, it's deterministic.
Right.
It's not. Load curve's changing. It's puts and takes. It's puts and takes.
Yep.
And managing that is incredibly hard. One of the things I've never seen, but I've always thought, why are we not doing this, is take the aggregated, let's take smart lighting, as simple as smart lighting is, the aggregated lighting load in the city. Is that not a dispatchable
Yes.
resource for demand response?
And highly predictable.
I can tell you, December 13th in Portland, Oregon, they probably got a peak setting, and I guarantee you, all the street lights in town are on. And you could trim them 15, 20% on wattage, and no one would even know that light dropped.
That's right.
But no one is doing that. That's an aggregated load that with smart lighting can be used to drop peak shaving. And that's actually, I think, a straightforward point. We're talking about much more exotic things to do, and yet we can't even do something where most people are now putting in smart lighting in the cities, and we can't even use that as a demand generation.
It's a great point.
Demand
That's a
response.
great point. Anybody else wants to chime in
Yeah.
on that answer?
I think I can address your question from, our project experiences. A lot of customers, of course, now want to integrate smart charging infrastructure into their microgrids, usually at a facility level, warehouse, campus, fleet operations, you name it. One of the biggest challenges that we run into is that over the past maybe 8 years or so, a lot of these EVSE charging network companies were trying to keep closed systems, right? So you really cannot integrate with them very easily. And then if you are talking directly to a charger, you have so many makes, models, then the costs are dropping, for a couple of $100 you can buy one now. So now there's a whole range of things that you have to talk to in a different way. So that's kind of the situation. And we have ended up having to work with our customers to figure out how do you crack that nut in general. So I think what's happening is that these closed networks I think their days are numbered. I don't think that can really scale as a model. So even if they do that, they'll have to open it up and provide proper APIs and whatnot. And then same thing is happening on the individual network level. The standards are maturing. And for us, it's now a controllable load. It has certain characteristics, and so long as that's actually satisfied, then it actually plugs in like a regular DER, whether it's for charging or for discharging. So that's kind of what we're seeing, but we're not quite there yet.
Excellent, excellent. We have another question.
Yes, where this idea is abroad that as the EV fleet increases, it will be a great backup to the power system. But what is great, this will some sort of Uberization of electricity, where an asset has a separate use, except who is going to compensate you for the wear and tear and early death of your battery? Will the utilities pay you, and will there be a system to record the amount of electricity you sold into the system? And will that be at your will or at the will of the utility in need of the electricity?
Wow.
Anybody want to jump on that? I have an answer, but anybody want to jump on that?
I'll just tell you very briefly one of the issues that utilities are going to face. Utilities see the world in two flavors. It's not Neapolitan ice cream, that's 3 flavors. It's just 2. It's capital and O&M. They hate O&M, they love them some capital. Well, who owns the asset? They like to own assets. They struggle when it ends up being an expensible feature.
Sure.
They can't capitalize that. They can't make a return on that. At least I'm talking to IOUs.
Yeah, primarily, yeah.
That's going to be kind of an issue here in this scenario. They love physical assets, and now you're talking about services or things that well, you're not owning the asset, but you're maintaining it. They don't like to maintain assets they don't own. That's going to be a problem.
Yeah. Anybody want to
I'll just real quick. I think, obviously there's a lot of dynamics and it could get very complex, but actually to Sunil's point, I think the first step would be more of a simplistic approach of how you would incentivize a customer. And I'll use, there's a battery storage program up in the Northeast called Connected Solutions and it's been very successful and very lucrative for the battery owner. So think of, an EV would just be a glorified battery storage unit. So what they're doing with Connected Solutions is if you enroll into the program, it is a customer-owned asset. You enroll during certain, time periods. they're going to give you windows where they need you to export or use as much of your battery storage to, for load curtailment as possible. Now, at the end of that season, they pay $1 per kilowatt of average kilowatt delivered during those times, and they pay the owners. And I mean, those battery owners are getting $1,000 a season for use of that battery. So that would probably be kind of a similar phased approach of how you would handle an EV incentive.
Yeah. I'll wrap by saying, you got a point?
Yeah, I would posit that we have already reached peak personal automobile ownership, right? In the US, we used to be selling 17 million cars a year. Increasingly, those are not going to be individually owned, right? These are going to be increasingly fleet owned, increasingly autonomous, increasingly connected, and increasingly electric. And so that problem gets easier to solve over the years. Today, it's intractable, right? Who's going to compensate me for my battery impact, right? And if you own a fleet of 1,000 vehicles, that just becomes part of the business model. You're an aggregator on
Yep.
this.
Yeah, I think that the question really trumps something that we do and offer as a business model with CMG to utilities and aggregators. And it's really the ultimate business model. If I was running a muni and a co-op, I would do a deal with Tesla, buy the entire fleet of cars that they could sell in my territory. I would keep the control of the batteries, and then I would call somebody like Apple Leasing and lease the cars back into the marketplace for 60% of the value. And if you are driving my leased Tesla to you as a utility and anything went wrong with the car, you just stop at any of the kiosks that I'm going to put anywhere in the city, and we'll deliver a new car to you in 15 minutes. The same car, same model, identical, no questions asked. We'll take the car back.
I like to leave it with a thought. Don't hate me for this, but in business school we learned this idea of aggregation, disaggregation, bundling, unbundling. Things bundle, like cable TV packages, then later somebody unbundles them. They make money on the bundle, unbundle. In the South we call that feed the pigs, slaughter the hogs.
Yeah.
This concept that, what we're talking about here is the hogs, the centralized monolithic views of power and delivery is the hog to be slaughtered. The DERMS is the disaggregation of energy. You referred to an equity around that. That's the feeding the pigs. So you probably will have a second earworm now that I left you with. I apologize for that. But feed the pigs, slaughter the hogs.
Absolutely. And with that, I want to ask you to please give a hand for our panel.
Thank you.
I think they did a beautiful job. We got mugs, and we're taking a selfie. Let's get a selfie real quick as we're running.